Hello, good morning. My name's Colin and this is Plod with Me. This is the channel where I take you around bits of London and tell you a bit about their history. And today we are going to start off at what was envisioned to be part of a Via Triumphalis, a great victory way for one of the kings in times gone by. And that is the reason why I'm standing opposite the widest street in London. If I can get this bad boy to turn around, there we go. So this is Portland Place. Now the street, in fact the whole walk that we're going to do, I imagine this is going to take probably about 3 videos, but the whole walk that we're going to do was all down to the sort of imaginations and visions of 2 architects and town planners. So the original ones for this part, for Portland Place, were 2 brothers called Robert and James Adams, who were very big architects in the sort of 1760s, 1770s, and they developed Portland Place. Now there's a whole story behind this, so let's get that out of the way first. So basically, at the end of Portland Place, basically where the Langham Hotel now stands, and we'll pass that, and where the BBC is now, there was once a big mansion called Foley Place. Okay, this is 1760s, or Foley House, sorry. So Foley House was owned by a lord. The land at this end was owned by the Duke of Portland, and he wanted to develop it, because what was behind me at that point, and what was Portland Fields, or Portland Place, was just all fields. So you had the big mansion house, and he was looking up this way, and all he was seeing was fields and greenery, and that was the way he wanted to keep it. There was a legal dispute between the Duke of Portland and Lord Foley for some years, because Foley didn't want them building and obstructing his view. So when Foley died, the house and the land that he owned passed to his cousin, and he came to an agreement, and it actually ended up being an act of parliament. Like, you know, it was all done through their contacts in Parliament and whatnot, because obviously both of them were members of aristocracy. But the agreement that they came to was Portland could develop this land, provided he didn't obstruct the view from the house of the little village and fields of Marylebone, which were behind me. Now, with that in mind, Robert Adam and James Adam, they then constructed the street to be exactly the width of Foley House, which was about 125 feet, which is, what, about 40 metres thereabouts. And at the time, this island that you're seeing down the middle, all this was only put in the 1970s, so 200 years earlier this was just one big wide street, and that was why. Now I should say, with about, I think, one exception, all the buildings you're seeing now are none of the originals. A lot of it was damaged during the war, thanks to the Blitz, and there's been other various redevelopment. But in the 1800s, this was one of the places to live. This was very exclusive, and seen as like one of the, you know, the more well-heeled would have wanted to live. And then over time, as the big houses, you know, sort of fell out of favour, too expensive and all the rest of it, they started getting subdivided, you know, sort of would have been smaller houses, flats, and then things like embassies and sort of official associations started taking them over as well. But Robert and James Adams' original plan had been that this was going to be like an enclosed piazza. There was going to be big mansion houses on either side. You would have Foley House at the other end, and this end was basically fields. So there was no way for, you know, streets, or let's put it bluntly, poor people to get into the area. This was going to be a big enclosed piazza. But then, by the time they started developing it, it was the 1770s. Britain was having a little trouble with one of its colonies, which went on to become America, and it was broke. The country was broke, and as a result, a lot of the development plans had to change. So whereas the rich had originally been all up for buying these huge big mansions, basically they couldn't afford it. The country was running, I think the national debt was running at about 140% because of all the hassle in America, or what was to become America. And yeah, so even the rich couldn't afford the big mansions, and so the Adams brothers had to adapt their plans, build smaller townhouses, and some big ones, but some smaller townhouses in between. And so they were very adaptable in what they did. So that was a rough idea of Portland Place. Then if we fast forward to about 1810, another planner, John Nash, was appointed by no less a person than the Prince Regent, who would go on to become King George IV. Now, the reason he was called the Prince Regent, and we have the Regency era, is because his dad had several bouts of ill mental health during his reign when he was incapacitated. And because the country needed, constitutionally speaking, it needed a king or something of that ilk in place, the young Prince Regent, would basically take over the role in all but name of king. He did eventually become king in 1820 himself and lasted 10 years. And when he did die, I think most people thought, well, good riddance to bad rubbish, because he was extravagant. Extravagant in his drinking, his eating, his womanizing, but most of all in the amount of money that he spent. And let's face it was the country's money, and he was just absolutely chucking it away. If you've ever seen Blackadder III, he's the prince that is played by Hugh Laurie, who is forever losing huge amounts of money and spending it on trousers, it would seem. But his idea, and John Nash, the architect he employed, was to build a grand triumphal way. So this was around about 1810, between 1810 and 1820. Wellington had beaten Napoleon not long before this was all sort of being put together, and the Prince Regent at the time, who knew he was very unpopular, decided to sort of bask in the reflected military glory. So his idea was, I'll build a palace up here behind me in what is now Regent's Park. Build a palace here. I already have a palace down at St James called Carlton House. And what we'll do is we'll build this lovely big triumphal avenue between the two where I can do victory processions, and then the people will love me and everything will be great. So that was the plan. Unfortunately, he went broke as well. Like, he went broke lots. But the idea of building the palace behind me, it was all landscaped, it was all ready. And indeed, Nash had built half a dozen big mansions, very big things, and the idea was you were going to have this summer palace and a palace, and you were going to have the big mansions all around it, where the well-heeled would live close to where the king was based, and it was all going to be up this way. Okay, vast. And he built 6 of the houses. I think a lot of them are sort of land, certainly empty or sort of been bought probably by foreigners as investment potential. But basically, I don't think any of them are actually being lived in at the minute. They are huge big buildings. And this area over here is very, very large, hence why I didn't start up where the buildings are, because it would have taken me ages just to get to here. We'll maybe do that another day. But basically, the land behind, what was sort of green land and fields and farmland in the 1860s and 70s, 1760s and 70s, by the 1800s, that was going to be redeveloped and a palace built. But he ran out of money, never happened, and it's now become what's known as Regent's Park. Okay, so that's the origins of that. So let's start looking, and we will be walking the whole triumphal way down towards Carlton House, the great summer palace. Why do I keep saying summer? The great palace that some at the time, said it was on a par with Versailles and all the rest of it. But let's get started. And why not get started with a statue here? So, this statue says Prince Edward, Duke of Kent, fourth son of George III, so this would have been the Prince Regent's brother, on 2nd of November 1767, died 23rd, 1820, erected by the supporters of the numerous charities which he so zealously and successfully patronised. Now, you can see he's lifting his robe up to show you his legs, and that might seem a bit of a weird thing to be doing, but apparently at that time, 1820 or thereabouts, this was put up, not long after he died. At that time, the male leg was supposed to be very beautiful. And so the sculptor, he basically made a point of showing his legs off. So, like I say, it wouldn't be the norm now, but that was the thinking at the time. And this is one of the rare examples of a sculpture from early 1800s. It's still in the place where it was actually meant to be. So it hasn't been moved. Now, when I was walking around here, I did notice this little thing when I was walking around from the tube station, so I thought, let's throw this in while we're at it. Now, if any of you watched my series of videos, I think it was the city west of the city, St. Paul's West. I think it might have been video number 3, but I'm not certain. I talked about the origin of the clean water drinking fountains. And I also mentioned that they eventually put some fountains together for animals. And this is one of them. This would have been like a horse cattle trough. And let me see. It's actually easier to read from across the way. So I think it should say something like Metropolitan hold on. I can see and Cattle Trough Association at the end. Let me just stand back a bit without getting run over. Metropolitan. Oh, it's Metropolitan Drinking Fountain and Cattle Trough Association. That's it. It's come back to me. Metropolitan Drinking Fountain and Cattle Trough Association. So, originally, they were just like water fountains for people. Well, as I say, then with so much animals about at the time, let's face it, the main mode of transport then would have been horses. You would have had a lot of animals coming up to London going to market. And they all needed water. And providing it for free in the streets meant that they weren't having to go to pubs to get it, and then everybody getting drunk and leery. Now we have our first blue plaque. I hope you can read that okay. It's a bit sort of shiny. It says United States Embassy 1863 to 1866. Henry Brooks Adams, 1838 to 1918, U.S. historian, lived here. Now, he was the grandson of John Quincy Adams, the president, the great-grandson of John Adams, who was, I think he was the second president, if memory serves. And, as it says, he was a very famous historian. Did very well for himself in that regard. Did big volumes of work on U.S. history, amongst other things. And he spent the time living over here. I think part of it was sort of diplomatic, but I think prior to that he had also been here just, you know, in terms of literature, meeting other writers and that sort of thing. Now, I'm going to want to get over to the middle, so I want to see that statue. So this is a statue devoted to Joseph Lister, who is thought of as the father of modern surgery. He was very big. He embraced the ideas of Louis Pasteur about germ theory and infections and putrefaction after surgery and all that sort of stuff. And he embraced those theories and then, you know, sort of promoted cleanliness basically in hospitals. Now, he wasn't the first person. That was a Hungarian guy called Semmelweis, and he caught on to the idea that washing hands in between medical procedures could save lives, but nobody would believe him, and they ended up having a breakdown and then dying whilst in an asylum. But his beliefs, he didn't know why it was the case, he just knew that it worked. And it wasn't until Pasteur then sort of started using microscopes and stuff and developed this sort of theory about bacteria and germs that it sort of proved what Semmelweis already knew just from practice. And then Lister was the one who then embraced it in the sort of the health arena and promoted it. And in doing so has obviously saved Lord knows how many lives. Because the thing is, a lot of these establishments, in the same way that with the drinking fountains, they don't always believe everything straight away because they've been doing stuff for so long they think they're always right. But thankfully, his take on things was adopted. So it's a very nice statue. On the left hand side here it says science, on the side we just walked past it said surgery. Now, I think today is going to be all about me jumping across these middle islands without getting run over. So what to say, you got to imagine, 260 years ago, there was a big mansion down here, just right at the end, and this was its view all the way up here. I'm also pleased to say that when the time we finish this walk, there will be 2 instances of Northern Ireland popping up, which I wasn't aware of before I started doing the research, which is nice. Well, just my luck. I've walked over and here's a blue plaque. So, it says, Frances Hodgson Burnett, 1849-1924, writer lived here. Now, she wrote The Secret Garden, Little Lord Fauntleroy, I believe about 50 other books, but obviously those are the most famous. But this is where she was living. So obviously the books were paying well. And I don't know if you can see, but above the doorway it now says South Bank International School. So this is what I mean about these big places, you know, they get taken over by organisations. And then number 61 next to it says Queen's College Preparatory School. So what are now schools and embassies were once people's houses of the well-to-do. And you can see, because it's all been rebuilt, different styles. Like, you know, look at that style there, and then completely different this one, and then different again here, and then we sort of get back this one here. We sort of go back to what we're seeing up there in terms of the outside, very similar. So there will be a lot of architectural features in this walk. There will be a bit of rock and roll, and like I say, a bit of Northern Ireland, a bit of everything really. I don't know what this building is, but I've just been struck by a very large relief on the side of it. Oh, it's the Royal Institute of British Architects. Oh, let me get out of the sun. There's a car coming, I'll wait for him. The relief that caught my eye was up the top there. I'm not sure what that is supposed to depict. I like this gateway though. Oh, right, I see. So, like you got sort of a palace there, that's like a Palace of Westminster, that's, I don't know, that could be the British Museum. We got bridges on the right, more buildings down there, but they're all different types, and obviously showing you what architects do. I'm not sure why we've got lots of seahorses. Yeah, oh, household cavalry down the bottom there. So, if anybody wants to, oh yeah, that's St. Paul's up on the right there. If anybody wants to give any further explanation, feel free in the comments below. Train tunnel. Yeah. It's got a cafe, bookshop, exhibitions. I did read that there was some little architectural pieces of dragons on this street, but I'm not seeing them, so we'll not worry about that now. Now, let's see General Sikorsky. So it says General Władysław Sikorsky, 1881 to 1943, Prime Minister of the Polish government and Commander-in-Chief of the Polish Armed Forces, 7th of November 1939 to the 4th of July 1943. And if you're wondering why he's here, it's because he would have been the general of the sort of leader of the Polish government in exile during World War II. So obviously the Germans had overtaken Poland, and a lot of the Polish would have come here, because we were, in terms of European standards, we were the last man standing over here that hadn't been taken over. And so that's why de Gaulle came over here as well, like, you know, for the Free French, Sikorsky obviously for the Polish, and I'm sure there were many others. This is obviously a list of his campaigns. Second World War, Polish campaign, French campaign, Narvik, that was Norway, wasn't it? Battle of Britain, Battle of the Atlantic, Tobruk. Well, this can't all be, maybe Polish people took part in many of these. Well, it certainly took part in the Battle of Britain. So I'm guessing that these are all campaigns that the Polish fought in. Well, it was only unveiled in the year 2000. Okay. In memory of General Władysław Sikorsky and the soldiers, seamen and airmen of the Polish Armed Forces and the resistance movement 1939 to 45. So as I say, there would have been a number of European nations who had sort of governments in exile. Now, let me see what's the best way for me to get the next bit down. And here we have, oh, what's this? That's just caught my eye. Oh, the Embassy of the Republic of Poland. Well, there you go. That's that flash eagle emblem. And then it says, Earl Roberts, 1832 to 1914, Field Marshal lived here. Okay. And here we have our first bit of Northern Ireland. Now, I have to say, this guy apparently was born up near Port Stewart, where I have been countless times. My family has a caravan up on the coast, and that was where we used to go on holiday. Well, mostly Port Rouge, but like Port Stewart, it's the other side. It was the next town to the left. Port Rouge was on to the right, and we tended to favour Port Rouge. But anyway, I've been there countless times. This guy was apparently born up near there, and he got the Victoria Cross. So Field Marshal Sir George Stuart White, VC, various other medals and honours. Born 1835, died 1912. And from what I was reading about him, the story, like he fought in the various Indian wars, Afghan wars, all the rest of it. And the reason he got the Victoria Cross, which is the highest military medal you can get, and they're, a bit select about who they give them out to. But the reason he got it was he was commanding a lot of his troops, and they had been on a long march advancing towards the enemy. I think it was in India. They were outnumbered 8-1, and whenever they got there, the troops weren't exactly that enthusiastic about going into battle, given the odds and given the fact that they were all knackered. And apparently he took a rifle off one of them, scrambled up over a hill to engage the enemy, and shot dead the leader of the opposing army. So he was obviously a bit of a dude. And for that I got the VC, and then had a very distinguished career afterwards. So I am surprised. In Northern Ireland we don't have that many heroes that we get to celebrate. Obviously I'm very aware of Colonel Paddy, Blair Main, one of the founders of the SAS, but I'd never heard of this bloke. So good on him, I say. And getting a very grand statue on one of the main streets in London. So well done him. Now, let's go on down. Oh, we have another blue plaque. And indeed, the blue plaque is on what I believe is the only surviving house that the Adams built. So number 41, I'll just show it all to you. Number 41, and apparently this is one of the originals. I would suspect the facade has probably been a bit touched up since, given that. How's that for timing? Alright, let's wander around and look at the blue plaque. So a whole empty street, and he stops right as I'm filming. So it's now the Academy of Medical Sciences, according to the doorway. But the blue plaque says Thomas Gage, 1721-1787, commander of the British forces in North America, lives here. So he was one of the main leaders when it came to the British fight for independence. I think he served with Washington in his younger days at one point. And then obviously their fortune split with Washington, leading the American forces. And obviously, given how things turned out, you would have to say this guy didn't do that great. But all the same, he had a distinguished career. Obviously, the pay wasn't bad if he was living here. And, yeah. Because this would have been, if he was here 1770s, 1780s, this would have been not long after it was built. And this was one of the places to live in London. So he's obviously doing okay. Now, we are going to wander on down. You can see flags, because as I say, a lot of them have become embassies. I'm not sure what colour, what flag that represents. Oh, Colombia. There we go, it's the Colombian embassy. There we go. I am struck by this building over here, so I'm just going to try and get the other side of this lorry. But look at the reliefs up there. You see all the intricate reliefs in the front and along the top there. Lovely, isn't it? Don't know what it represents, but I like it. Which is basically my take on art. I don't know what I like, I don't know much about it, but I know what I like. As the Pope said in the Monty Python sketch, whenever Leonardo da Vinci provided the Last Supper with 13 disciples and a kangaroo. I spot another blue plaque. Now, if you're wondering why this is so empty, it's not Sunday, it's a bank holiday Monday. And I did endeavour to get up here relatively early. I imagine it's a lot busier during the week when it's not a holiday. Of course, just my luck. There's a blue plaque on the left as well, so I'll have to nip over there. Aha, now I read a little bit about this guy. This is now the Association of Anaesthetists. But it says, Sir Arthur Pearson, 1866-1921, founder of St Dunstan's, Blind Veterans UK, lived and worked here. So, he had been a big publishing magnate. I think he originally started the Daily Express, amongst other papers, and then sold it off. But he had made a lot of money, but he was big on philanthropy. He used to arrange organisations to take poor kids away to the seaside or to the countryside and all that sort of stuff that they wouldn't normally get to do. And I believe that organisation is still going today. But then he got some eye condition, not sure it was glaucoma or whatever, and he gradually went blind and eventually became completely blind. And then he worked on setting up organisations so that blind people could get proper jobs, as opposed to having to live off charity or whatever, and basically training them up in various trades like weaving and all that sort of thing. When I was a kid, it used to be piano tuning. You used to always have blind piano tutors who would come to the school and tune the pianos. But he was responsible for organisations, doing that sort of thing. And he was a big friend of Baden Powell, the guy who invented the Scouts. And the Scouts even did fundraising for him to get stuff done on Braille and all the rest of it. So, Sir Arthur Pearson, again, someone who made some use of his life and his money. And I'm just waiting to cross over. Yes, I could have crossed over at the lights, I'm just being lazy. But I thought with there not being much traffic, I thought I'd give it a go. So, this one says, Sir Kenneth Clarke, 1903 to 1983, art historian and broadcaster, lived here from 1934 to 39. Now, what Kenneth Clarke is most famous for, certainly for most of us anyway, I think he was head of the National Gallery and various other things, but for most people, there was a brilliant series made, I think it was the early 70s, called Civilization. And what it was at the time, Sir David Attenborough, I think he was head of BBC Two, and he commissioned him, and then basically he just said to him, what about doing a series on everything that mankind has sort of achieved over the years? And Sir Kenneth Clark took up the mantle, and he called it Civilization, and it was all about the progress from mankind, the arts and various other things, all the way up to that point. Now, given it was mostly, I think, about the arts, I haven't seen it for years myself. I'll have to rewatch it. It was a huge hit, and it was also an introduction to colour TV for most people, and it was one of the first times where they would film all around the world. Like, they went to all the different countries, showed art and various other things and sculptures and whatnot from all around the world. And if I remember right, there was one country left out completely, which caused some consternation. I think it might have been Spain, which, given some of the famous artists that have come from there, was a bit of a mistake. But other than that, it's widely recognised as being sort of groundbreaking television. So that's Sir Kenneth. Alright, let me check. How long have we been waffling? Yeah, that's what I thought. So we've got a little over the half hour mark. Okay, so I think that'll do us for part one. I will pick up again just from here. I'm going to start doing part two and get down to the next street. Okay, and at some point I'll have to change my battery, but we'll worry about that next point. Okay, so thanks for watching. If you got this far, hope you're enjoying it. Like I say, a bit of a mixture in this one, and we will be coming to the rock and roll bits as much as anything shortly in part two. But yeah, thanks for watching if you got this far, and hopefully I'll see you in part two. Alright, bye.